Good evening. Today's daf is daf Zayin. We are going to begin now on the bottom of daf Vav on the base. Omar Rava. Rava says 10 manulu pleni. If a woman comes to a man and says, give $100 to a certain person, and v'akadesh loch, and I will be mikudeshes by means of that $100 that you gave the individual. So Sarah comes to Reuven and tells Reuven, give $100 to Shimon, and I will be mikudeshes to you. So the halacha is mikudeshes. She is mikudeshes. Why is she mikudeshes? She did not receive any money. So the Gemara says midin arev. This is the halacha of a guarantor. And the Gemara explains arev in regards to a guarantor. Lav afal gavdali mati hanali yode. Even though in regards to a guarantor, when he guarantors money, so he commits himself for repaying the chayiv, even though he receives no actual benefit, as the money from the loan given to the leva. And nevertheless, even though he doesn't receive any benefit, he is mishabed himself. So hayitsunami, this woman as well, even though she receives no benefit, as the 100 dinars are given to somebody else, it's not even given to her. Nevertheless, she commits and transfers herself to the man who gives the money. So that's what the Gemara says. The reason why this money works, even though she didn't actually receive any money, is midin orev, midin a guarantor. And the Gemara discusses a similar case that heilach money v'yiskadshi lepleni. If a man gives 100 dinars to a woman and says to her, "Here are 100 dinars for you, and with this money you become mikudeshes to so and so." So Reuben comes and says, "Here's the $100, but you're not going to be mikudeshes to me. You're going to be mikudeshes to somebody else." So the halacha is mikudeshes. She is mikudeshes. Why is she mikudeshes? So the Gemara says, "Medin eved Knani." This is derived from the halacha of freeing eved Knani, and the Gemara explains eved Knani with regards to an eved Knani. Lav afagav deleko chos midi. In regards to a eved Knani, it is not the case that he acquires himself and is freed when someone gives his master money to free him, even though he loses nothing on of his own. In other words, he doesn't make any of the money. Nevertheless, kokoni nafshe. So even though he loses nothing on his own, so hai gavranami, this man too, this man too, the third party, even though he loses nothing of his own, he acquires this woman by means of the other man's payment. Now the Gemara discusses a third case. If a woman says to a man, 10 manul pleni, give 100, this woman comes to a man and says, give 100 dinars to so-and-so, and I will be mikudeshes to him. So the halacha is mikudeshes, she's mikudeshes, midin shneim, and this is derived from the combination of the halacha of both of these cases. That in other words, from the halachas of a orev and the halachas of eved Knani. How so? Orev, in regards to a guarantor, lav afagav deleikomati hanaliyodi. Even though in regards to a guarantor, he commits himself to repaying the chayiv, even though he receives no benefit from it. Nevertheless, he commits himself to it. Hayitsanami, this woman as well. Afagav deleikomati hanaliyodi. This woman too, even though she receives no benefit from this because she does not receive any of the money, she commits herself and transfers herself to him. So now the Gemara says, how could you compare these cases? In the case of a guarantor, the one who acquires the item in question, which is in the case of the commitment of the Arev, is the one who loses money when he gives the loan. Now, in the situation of the Kidushin, this man, in other words, a third party, acquires the woman and loses nothing of his own. So the Gemara says, Eved Kanani Yechiach, the halachas of Eved Kanani can prove that the Leika Chaser Memena, he does not lose his own money, and the Kokana Nafshe, nevertheless, he acquires himself. So the Gemara says, Midami, how could you compare? Hasam there hachdeko maknik koni. There, with regard to the Eved, the one who transfers ownership is the one who acquires it. as the master transfers ownership of the slave to the slave, and he himself acquires the money of the donor. However, the woman transfers herself and she does not acquire anything. So the Gemara says, the guarantor will prove otherwise. That even though by the guarantee he receives no benefit from the malva, nevertheless, that even though he does not benefit from anything, nevertheless he commits himself, just like the woman in this case. So in this similarity, one can learn that the woman is mukudeshes in the case from a combination of Evet Kanani and from the case of Arif. Rav asked the Shaila, hey, money back Kaddish and Ilach. If a woman says to a man, here is 100 dinars, and I will be mikudeshes to you. So the halach is, what's the halach? She's mikudeshes. So if so, if this is really so, then this is an example of property that serves as a guarantee is acquired with property that is not acquired. Land is a property. Whenever you have karko, that's considered a chosim mishubadim, which means it's land that serves as a guarantee and is derived by way of a analogy to the same type of people that it's stable. Money is property that does not serve as a guarantee. Through his acquiring the money, this man acquires the woman as well. Fine. So that's what he says. So im kain have the nechasim sheish lamachrayis, niknim nechasim sheish lamachrayis. So Ravashi asked, "Vanan ibchatanan," but we learned the opposite Mishnah. Nechasim she'en lamachrayis, niknim nechasim sheish lamachrayis. The chesed b'shtar b'chazaka. We learned that property that does not serve as a guarantee can be acquired with property that serves as a guarantee through giving money, through giving a shtar, or through giving or through taking possession of them. So property that serves as a guarantee cannot be acquired by means of acquiring property that does not serve as a guarantee. So Amalei Mazur says to Ravashi, "Me service Amalei Agav." Do you think that when we say that it means with a kinyan Agav, Hachab Adam Chashav Askin? Here we're talking about with a Adam Chashav. The Bahi I know the Kamakav Matanamine Gomer Makna then Afshay. That here we're dealing with an important man, and due to the benefit that she receives from the fact that he listens and accepts a gift from her, she agrees to transfer himself to him. Now, the Gemara goes back to what we said earlier with regards to what we're learning in the cases of Ariv and the case of Evet Kanani. The Gemara says, we learned that and the same din would apply in regards to money. That one can learn a valid kinyan in the modes derived from the cases of a Ariv and a Evet Kanani. Where it says and it's necessary to say the halacha with regards to Kidushin and in regards to Mamena, in regards to monetary acquisitions. Why? In Kidushin, if it would only tell me the halachas of Kidushin, I would say Mishum the Ha'itza Nechle Bechol Dehu Kiddush Lakish Lakish Tav the Meziv Tandum the Meziv Armelu. So I would say the dafka in the case the Kiddushin works because, as the Rish Lakish says, there's a popular saying amongst women, it's better to sit as two bodies. In other words, to be married and to sit alone like a widow. A widow prefers any type of husband than being left alone. So she'd be willing to commit herself to Kiddushin by any form of benefit. But with regards to money, I would say that these types of kinyanim are not effective. Now, and if it only said about Mamena, I would say Mishum the Isiyai of the Mechila. I would say that it applies only in the case of money because money can be waived. In other words, a person can relinquish his claim to money that is in someone else's possession without receiving anything in return. Alba Kiddushin, but with regards to Kiddushin, which is it's not entirely depending on the will and agreement of the woman, as she must actually receive the Kiddushin. I would say that it does not work. Therefore, it's necessary to say that this halacha works in both cases. Now, Omar Rava says, if a man says to a woman, he's shali chetzi, be mikudesh just the half of me. So the halacha is mikudeshes. She's mikudeshes. But if she says chetzich mikudeshes li, but he said to her, half of you are mikudeshes to me, she's not mekudeshes. So why when you say chetz mekudeshes doesn't work? Because isha amar rachmana v'lechatz isha, you have to actually get mekudeshes to a woman, and not half a woman. Hachanami l'cheda here also isha amar rachmana v'lechatz ish. The Torah says a man and not a half a man. So Amar Lei, so Rabbi says Tabaya, Hachi Ashta, how can you compare the cases? Hasam, there, it's the Beit Lechazi. There, a woman is not eligible for two men. If a person attempts to be Mekudeshes, to Mekadesh half of a woman, it means that he must leave her other half to someone else. And that's impossible, because a woman cannot be married to two men. Can a man not marry to a woman? He can. And this is what he says. He's saying that if I want to marry somebody else, Nesivna, I will marry another woman. So the Kidushin should be a good Kiddush. Oh, Malay Mazutra Mazutra, the son of Ramari sells to Meruva, tells to Ravina, but in a case where he says to her, half of you is Mekudeshes to me, let the Kidushin spread through all of her. We like Tanya, didn't we learn? The halach is if a person says about an animal, this leg of the animal is a oila, is a burnt offering, so all of it is considered an oila, as the kedusha of the legs spreads throughout the entire body. So the same thing over here, by the kedusha of half, it should spread to the entire body. And Masutra says, even according to the opinion who says that it's not entirely a korban oila, but that's when the person's makdish something by the animal that the neshama is not dependent on it. In other words, if you detach it, the animal will still live. But when it comes to consecrating something which the animal's life depends on it, have a kula ela, everyone will agree that it is a korban ela. Here too, as the woman cannot survive without half of her body, why doesn't the Kidushin spread throughout the entire body? So the Gemara says, Midami, how can you compare the case? Hasam, there in the case of the animals, behema, in the case of the animal, it involves a creature without intellectual capacity. Hacha das tacheres. Here, the issue depends on another mind, that of the woman herself. The woman must indicate that she wants the Kiddushin to take effective. Now, he says, this case is only comparable to the halacha of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, if you have an animal that belongs to two partners, if with regards to an animal that belongs to two partners, if one of them was makdish, the half of it that belongs to him, and he goes back and acquires the other half from his partners, Allah is kedusha in kreva. It's kedusha, it's consecrated, but even though it's hektish to the Beis Hamikdash, it's not brought to the mizbeach, because when he first sanctified the animal, it was not fit to be makriv. The hektish animal, the hektish did not spread throughout the entire animal without the consent of the other party, the partner. Now, this flaw cannot be fixed, and the animal is permanently disqualified from being sacrificed as a korban. Now, but it is hektish now. This is enough to render it that you can make a tomorrow. You can make a substitute. The person exchanges the animal with another, which is a chulin. So the second animal becomes a hektish, and this is and it works. It's hektish, but may not be sacrificed on the mizbeach. So Gemara says shamas minat tlas. You can learn now three halachas from this din. First of all, shamas minat balachayim nitchim. You can learn from here that living animals can be permanently deferred. In other words, not only a korban that has already been shechted, but also a living animal that has been separated as a korban from which is disqualified, it's permanently deferred from being shechted on the mizbeach. Likewise, here, when he was makdish only half, the animal cannot be offered and is rejected. This halacha is in opposition to the claim that one can shecht animals, that only shechted animals are permanently rejected. Shamas Mina, and furthermore, you can learn that you can learn from here that once you defer at the outset, in other words, a condition disqualifying the animal from being shechted that was present when the animal was first makdish is considered permanently dochi, and one does not say that the halacha of dichi applies only to animal that was eligible to be makdish on the korban at the time it was hekmakdish. The third thing is yesh dicha b'damim. We can learn from here that when you have dicha, when you have deferral, not only with regards to carbon, but also in regards to money, dicha applies even to an animal whose value was hektish. In this case, half of the animal was not makdish to be on the mizbeach, and yet it's still permanently considered dicha on the mizbeach. If a man says to a woman, half of you is mukudeshes with half of you is mukudesh with half of one pruta, and half of you with half of one pruta. So halacha is what's the halacha? So kiv the amar chatzi pruta pascha. Do we say that since he said there half of one pruta, he's divided his statement? In other words, by specifying half of one pruta, his kavana is that the Kidushin to be performed in two stages, with one half pruta for each stage, and half of one pruta for does not. We know you need to have a shava pruta, or perhaps he was just counting towards the full sum of the Kidushin and intends that the entire Kidushin should be effective. Even if you want to say that this is considered as he was counting, then what if he said with one pruta and half, with one pruta and half of you, and with one pruta and half of you, what's the halacha? Now, so once he says pruta, so now he's dividing his statement and he intends to be mekadosh her two halves separately, and the person cannot do that. Or do we say that day it's considered as he was counting? In other words, his kavana is he intends to complete the action that day as though she was mekudesh with two prutas. And the Gemara says, even if you want to say that he does on the day that he's counting, so what about what if he says half of you is mekudeshes with one pruta today, and half of you is mekudeshes with one pruta tomorrow? What's the halacha? So do we say once he says tomorrow paski, now he's divided his statement, and which prevents the days from being combined? Or maybe what he's saying is Kidushin or maybe he's saying that the Kidushin begins from now and will not be completed until tomorrow. Then Rabbi further asks Shaila, your two halves are mekudesh with one pruta. Now, what's the halacha? Do we say that here certainly spoke to her at one time? In other words, he did not divide his statement in two, and therefore it should be considered a valid Kiddushin. Or perhaps a woman may not be Mukudesh at all. And all these questions, the Gemara says Tekum, and whenever there's a Tekum, we always go L'chumah. What if a man comes to another guy and says, I have two sons, you have two daughters, let your two daughters be Mukudesh to my two sons with one pruta? So what's the halacha? Do we go after the giver and the recipient? And as the giver gives one pruta and the recipient receives one pruta, there's money here. But since one pruta is considered money and therefore the Kidushin is valid. Or perhaps we follow them. In other words, we follow the sons and the daughters, and there's not a pruta for each one of these individuals. And therefore the Kidushin should not be a good Kidushin. So the Gemara says, Teku. A person said to another, I acquire your daughter and your cow with one pruta. What's the halacha? Do we say that he's saying that take this pruta and like divide it half and half, which will not work because you need to have a shava pruta for the lady? Or he means to say is no. With your daughter, I want to be kind of the daughter with a pruta, and your para with Mashiach. So the Gemara says, Teku is a Teku. Last part of the Gemara, if he says, I acquire your daughter and your land with one pruta, what's the halacha? Do we say, does he mean that your daughter should be mekudesh with half of one pruta and your land should be acquired with half of a pruta, which will not work? Or he means to say that with the pruta and the karkas with chazak, and the Gemara says, Teku, this is unresolved. Tomorrow we will continue from Ahu Gavra.